Good afternoon, and if anyone's in Hawaii, good morning to you. Thank you for joining the NASEO State Appliance Standards Efficiency webinar. My name's Rodney Sobin. I am a Senior Program Director at NASEO, and I'm joined by Maddie Kohler, who's on our staff in our Buildings program. We're very pleased to offer this webinar in collaboration with the Appliance Standards Awareness Project, or ASAP, on state-level appliance and equipment energy and water efficiency standards. These are standards at the state level, and you'll hear something about federal ones as well, that are among the most effective policies for achieving energy and water savings. Some of you in the audience probably know a fair amount in that some of your states are doing these things. Others, this will be a fairly new subject. These standards can help not only achieve energy and water savings, but you'll hear a bit into how it's starting to play in peak electricity demand reduction and grid services as well. We're fortunate today to have several speakers. I will introduce, first maybe next slide, go over a little bit of the logistics. All of the attendees are started in a muted mode, so we don't have background noise. We will be having a Q&A session after the presentations today. And please use the GoToWebinar question box to ask a question, or click on the raise hand tool to be recognized and unmuted. As always, these NASEO webinars are recorded and slides will be posted, which will be accessible via the NASEO website under the Events tab. We are very fortunate today to be joined by, I hope, 3 speakers. Okay. I will introduce them first before handing over the presentations to them. We'll start off with Marianne DeMasio, who is the State Policy Manager for the Appliance Standards Awareness Project, where she leads state standards development and provides technical assistance to state stakeholders. She builds the support for appliance efficiency standards at the federal and state levels, building coalitions of supporters through outreach, education, and advocacy. She is one of the main authors of States Go First, How States Can Save Consumers Money, Reduce Energy and Water Waste, and Protect the Environment with New Appliance Standards. That's an awfully long title for a paper, but anyway. She will be followed by Howard Wigg, who is an energy analyst at the Hawaii State Energy Office, and he is also the chair of the State Building Code Council in Hawaii, and is a project manager in charge of their efforts on the International Energy Conservation Code, although today he'll be talking about standards which have some interaction with codes. Third to bat, or I guess if you include me, she'd be fourth, and therefore the cleanup hitter, is Sarah Vorpal, who is a Senior Energy Policy Specialist at the Washington State Energy Office, where she focuses on distributed energy resources. In the past year, she has supported agency requested legislation for the Washington Department of Commerce, updating state appliance standards, and is currently working on implementing this law, including a first-in-the-nation design requirement for electric storage water heaters. So with that, why don't I hand it over to Marianne? Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Rod. Happy to be here today to talk about appliance efficiency standards on the state level. And next slide, please. Just a couple of words about who we are and what we do. Appliance Standards Awareness Project has been around since 1999, and we work on, as Rodney said, both federal and state level to advance appliance efficiency standards, and have a steering committee of a variety of different types of groups, from consumer groups to utilities, environmental and state government and energy efficiency groups. Next slide. So the question that we're addressing today is, what have 7 states already done and another 10 or so plan to do? So 7 states have adopted appliance standards California has been doing this for years. A number of other states in the past have adopted appliance efficiency standards, primarily when the federal Department of Energy hasn't been advancing standards. States have taken the lead. So I won't have every single state on here that has done it, but more the states that have passed standards recently. So you see the list on the left, and some of those are full packages of standards, and some are just a portion of the package. For example, New York passed standards for just water efficiency standards. Hawaii passed standards for products that California has, and Colorado, Vermont, and Washington passed a bigger package of about 15 standards each. So right now, we have about 10 more states that are in process or considering standards. There are some others in various degrees. So if you're saying, hey, my state is doing it and it's not on there, we'd be happy to talk to you. And I know that some of you on the phone are somewhat new to standards, and some have gone through the process already and have state standards, but I always like to start with basic information about standards. So next slide, please. Just a graphic of what standards are. It's an imperfect graph because it's not so nice and neat like this with the pyramid over on the left, but on the top, you have the portion of products that are very high efficiency or Energy Star levels. In the middle, you have a bunch of other products, and then standards come in at some point once you have a lot of products that are more and more efficient, and says, okay, here's a minimum efficiency level for these products, and the products that are least efficient will not meet that level. So in some cases, you have, when standards are set for either appliances, equipment, lighting, or plumbing products, you might have 80% of the products on the market already are meeting these standards. So it's really just about 20% of the products that are not going to be able to be sold in a particular state. Sometimes it varies what that percentage is, but standards would never come in and say, oh, no products are on the market meeting this efficiency level, let's set standards there, or 2%. It's usually something at the state level where we have a significant percentage of products already on the market that would meet a standard. Next slide. And what's the difference between federal and state? So at the national level, they will apply to the manufacture and import of products. So you have, there are about 60 products with federal standards, and there are things like refrigerators and clothes washers and boilers and furnaces. So they apply to the manufacture and import. On the state level, in most cases, it's to the sale and installation of products. And California is an exception. In many cases, they'll go with the manufacture date of products, which is not the same as the manufacturer. That means in the U.S., you can't manufacture products for sale in the U.S. that don't meet, say, refrigerator standards. At the state level, it just means it refers to the date of manufacture. But in most states, it's limiting their sale of the products that are not meeting the standard. And in general, though not 100% of the time, if there's a federal standard, they will preempt state standards. So if there's a refrigerator standard on the federal level, you cannot set a refrigerator standard on the state level, even if it's more stringent. Next slide. And how does this work in between the federal and state? What usually happens is that Congress will establish standards and then tell the Department of Energy that they need to update them periodically. In most cases in states, it's the legislature that will set standards, though some places like California, some states have the regulatory authority to set the standards without going through a legislative process. Oregon and Connecticut have that capability. And between the states will often lead the way. We've seen this twice in the history of standards, that in the late 80s and then again in the early 2000s, when there was not much going on the federal level, states led the way, setting a lot of standards, many of which are now those federal standards that we see today. And now is another opportunity to lead the way because the federal government has missed deadlines for about 21 updates of standards so far. So it is the states that are taking the lead. Next slide. So why are some states setting standards? Some of it is to meet goals. There are the states that have climate goals. There's some that have some energy efficiency goals, and this standards will help meet some of those goals. Consumers will save. Also businesses, municipalities, depending on the products, they will save on utility bills. Another big reason is to limit the need for new power plants and pipelines, and for water infrastructure. We have a number of bills that save water, a number of products that save water. So these products will also limit the need for water infrastructure. So I mentioned taking the lead while Department of Energy is behind on many things. And then jobs, they're kind of what is called indirect jobs, that people have more money in their pockets, so they're spending more money. It's not being sent to out-of-state companies or out-of-country companies that are producing energy. Next slide, please. So we prepare each year a model bill. We did a report in 2017. We updated the information for 2020, and this year's bill has standards for 18 products. With the rollbacks of federal standards for light bulbs, we also have a provision for light bulb standards that are not preempted for federal standards that states could go. It's not the super long list, but it's some light bulbs that are not preempted that still have significant sales. And then we also have a provision to backstop federal standards in case any standards are rolled back. Next slide we can just go over quickly is just wrong one. So where do they come from? We never start fresh with standards. We'll pull from other programs. So California standards, Energy Star and WaterSense, we don't take the newest standard. We'll usually go with the one that's already been established. And sometimes we have industry standards. In this one, there are industry standards for hot tubs. Next slide. These products here in the 2020 model bill, you can see, are a mix of residential, we have some light bulbs, we have computers, portable air purifiers, there's some commercial kitchen products with the different ovens, steamers, and a number of plumbing products like faucets, shower heads, toilets, spray sprinklers. Next. And this, just very briefly, are some of the light bulbs that are not preempted from federal standards. It's not an exclusive list, but they're just a sampling of some of the bulbs. Next slide. So how does the state decide which products? I mentioned earlier that there are different products, different states pick different things. We've crafted a model bill so that there can be some consistency within the states, but not all states will go for every single product. So you could just take the top energy savers. There's some states that are drought prone that might just want the water products. And just to note that some of the top savers in the bill happen to be water products. Faucets and shower heads have very big savings. They're both water and energy savings. And some states don't want to be the first state or want just California products, or they don't want any opposition at all. So we are happy to work with any state that's interested in going through this list and deciding what works best for them. And we have a table that will help with that also. Next. And we provide state-by-state savings. And just note, I think it's really important to note that all the standards that we recommend are cost-effective for the consumers and businesses that are purchasing these products, so that they will be saving money on these products. Some of them, though, have no additional cost for the more efficient products, and some do, but the paybacks on those are average is less than 1 year, though some of them are up to 3 years. And the next slide, please. I just put a sample on here. I looked at someone who would be on the call today. So Tennessee, this is just a sample. So for each state, we have savings This is a cumulative savings. I didn't put the whole list on here, but there would be the total number of products. This is just the beginning and the bottom of the list. And you can see the savings we put together for electricity, gas, water, and greenhouse gases. And then on the next page, hi, we hear some chatter in the back. On the next page is another page of the savings where you can see that these are annual savings and these relate to some of the dollar savings. So, for example, in 2025, there would be $101 million estimated for savings on utility bills in that 1 year in Tennessee. So we can provide that for any state. Next. And I just have two more slides. So currently, we have questions about implementation, and some of the states are going through the process of figuring this out and how they work on implementation. If a state has if a standard has is the same as a California standard, states can refer to the California database of products where they list all the products that would meet the California standards, but not all the products are California. And there are some that are based on Energy Star or WaterSense, so you can refer to some of those tables for that, but it's not always easy to see which products meet the standards or not. So there is currently a scoping study underway that's funded by the U.S. Climate Alliance for a multi-state database. There used to be one in progress that was used about 12 years ago. Technology has outlived it, so we're seeing if there could be another multi-state appliance standards database. So there's a study underway, and then U.S. Climate Alliance and NYSERDA plan to fund the development of the database, and this will make it much, much easier for states to be able to implement the standards and say refer to the database. There'd likely be an annual fee for doing this, but in the past it was reasonable and states were able to participate. And lastly, for any states interested in moving ahead with state standards, our organization will work with you. We often will reach out to many different people in the states to pull phone calls together. We coordinate between states so we can have lessons learned, and we'll provide a technical assistance about the products, the standards. We have some materials and fact sheets. We have the savings analysis. So we're available to help states that are interested in moving forward. And I think the last slide just has my contact info. So thank you. I'd be happy to answer questions during the Q&A.
Thank you very much, Marianne. We will hold off on questions until all the presentations are done. Let's see, Howard, are you able to speak? We have encountered. Oh, you are there! Hooray! Okay,
Yay.
you were up to bat.
Yeah, that
you.
took quite a few tries, but persistence pays here.
Okay, thank you for dealing with our technical constraints. Go ahead.
And I'm joined here by Gail Suzuki-Jones, also of the Energy Office. And this may break your heart, but I don't have any slides. I try to avoid them as often as possible. So we were, I guess, Marianne, would you call us not an early adopter of the additional
yes.
appliance measures? And at the moment, what we did, we put this through the legislature, with the initial batch of additional appliances last year, and we got a lot of support from the environmental groups. And here's one point I really, really want to emphasize is the need to form alliances to get any new bill passed. One of the best books I've read recently is Code Sign Chaos by Jim Mattis, 5-star general who briefly served under President Trump as the Department of Defense head and then left. But one of his big points that he makes in the book is you need to form alliances. And that's precisely what we did. We got the word out to all the environmental groups, and also we reached out to the counties who saw the value of this and put a lot of pro-testimony into the bill process. And the only opposition we got was from the Retail Merchants Association, and they just had mild opposition. And I talked to the lady there and said, no, we're not trying to do anything new or different or revolutionary. And she was ameliorated. So the bill went through virtually unimpeded. And this session, we're adding another 4 appliances. Actually, one of our allies has introduced that bill, where there's, I think it's 7 or 8 new additional appliances that Washington and Oregon have added, and they chose just to stick to those appliances with high or big energy savings. I think I never got a justification from them, but I think they just wanted to simplify the bill as much as possible. And that's another hint. Keep your bills, your language as simple as possible. Just get to the point. And one of the selling points that we made was that I'm in the energy building code field, and we can realize tremendous energy savings from that. And guess what? Appliance savings estimated projections is right on the heels of the building energy code. And so that's huge for us. Hawaii was the first state to declare a goal of 100% clean energy by the year 2045. And that's a pretty darned ambitious goal, and we need all the tools we can have in our arsenal for that, and certainly appliance efficiencies is top among them. And another selling point I make is that once you have a new appliance in your home or in your business, it's just going to sit there. Unlike renewable energy, you don't have to maintain it, you don't have to keep feeding it clean fuel or anything. It's just there until the end of its life. And I've sometimes gotten the concern, well, at the end of life, maybe somebody will put in a less efficient appliance in its place, something cheaper. Well, I'm a great fan of Moore's Law, and that applies to computers. And Dr. Moore said that, this is back in the early 70s that he predicted this, the capability of computers would double every 18 months, and the cost of computers would fall by half every 18 months. And he was pretty well on record, such that we, in our iPhones, we have more computing capability than did NASA at the time of the first moon launch. And I point out that the appliances are not improving efficiency at the same rate as computers, not by any means, but they are getting better and better and better. We all experience that in our own lives, so that at the end of 15 years or whatever the appliance life is, the new products available are going to be almost unbelievably more efficient than that. So in a sense, we're underestimating the value of appliance efficiencies. And that's about our story. Again, the legislature has been very, very open to our bills, and it makes total sense because our testimony is short, sweet, simple, to the point. And we point out that it's going to contribute to 100% clean energy by the year 2045. Oh, and the cost. The cost differential between our appliances and the less efficient, I think you pointed this out, Marianne, is very, very, very small. And that's another good selling point for us. I think that's about my main points that I want to make. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Howard. And I do want to encourage people to think of questions for the Q&A portion. And again, please use the raise hand when the appropriate time comes and the question box. So now we move on to Sarah in Washington State. Take it away.
Thank you so much. And Howard, don't worry, in Washington, we have lots and lots of slides, so I'll surely make up for that with my presentation. So yeah, I'm here to talk about the appliance standards legislation that passed in the 2019 session. And so yeah, just lots of great lessons learned and walk through some of that work. So if we could go to the next slide. So the Washington State Department of Commerce, we administer around 100 programs, ranging everywhere from housing and homelessness to some of this energy work. So here in the state energy office is where I am at. We are kind of just hopping back into appliance standards after somewhat of a long absence at the state level. Next slide, please. So yeah, I'll be talking briefly about the 2019 legislation, which became effective last year. So if we go to the next slide. This is, it was originally created, state standards were originally created in 2005 with some amendments in the kind of the early aughts or late aughts. And yeah, so it had been about 10 years since we had come back to look at this legislation. And luckily we have we had great support in the legislature. So I'd like to give a shout out to Representative Jeff Morris, who really had worked on this in the early days and then continued to want to work on it. So we got through this legislation that was agency request legislation with a lot of support from our representative this past year. Next slide. So this bill, I guess it's now a law, but we still have House Bill 1444, still near and dear to my heart, establishes energy and water efficiency standards for multiple products. That was based on ASAP's base bill. And then we also added on a design requirement for electric storage water heaters. And we also took the opportunity to update about 5 existing state standards as well. An important difference in our bill is that we have compliance is based on the date of manufacture, not at date of sale. So that's just one element in the way that you can kind of customize what you're doing within your state. Next slide, please. So this is just a brief look at all of the standards we took on. I don't have to spend too much time on this, but you can see there is a mixture of water products, lighting products, commercial products, as well as some others, and then the electric storage water heater, which is down there at the end. Next slide, please. As Marianne said, yeah, we're basing, this is all based on existing standards and methods, except for the electric storage water heater. So I won't spend time on this. So we can go to the next slide. Although I will say, for a state like Washington, having things based on existing standards and other state work was extremely useful in terms of getting this bill passed. It was a really important talking point. In Washington, we'll really see ourselves as fast followers on a lot of this work. So I think, being able to tell the legislature that these are established standards that have a lot of products in the market really went a long way to helping some of the conversation. And that's just to quickly mention some of the other provisions in the Washington law. We have rulemaking authority to adopt backstops for federally covered products. We can update new versions by reference, which is really nice. It means we don't have to run a bill every time we want to just update some of the standards that are pre-existing. And then there is a provision to allow us to adopt the California standard on high CRI lamps if it comes before the implementation date we have in our bill. We're going to do a report to the legislature to talk about when state standards get preempted. So we'll be tracking that internally. And then we're also going to use the kind of testing certification programs from other states, as we already mentioned. That also goes for labeling and listing requirements as well, which I believe I talk about a bit later. We also had the opportunity to repeal the kind of an outdated water standard, which was really limiting local jurisdictions' availability to do some good work there. So just a quick mention on that. Next slide, please. Right, so we're updating our rules now, or I should say we have updated a large chunk of our rules. So that 17 products, we've just got done with rulemaking. So last year we started in August, September, hosting some pre-rulemaking workshops to talk to stakeholders. We had draft language a little bit later, and we just submitted that proposed language, and that will be enacted in February. So we dropped it in January, and it will be acted in February, which is very exciting. And it includes deleting out a bunch of old products, which were numerous. So we had a lot of cleanup to do since 2005, adding new products in from the 2019 legislation, except for a couple that had some outstanding sort of issues happening at the federal level that we've left off, and then update administrative and enforcement sections. So as I mentioned, that includes testing and certification, labeling and listing requirements, which we also leaned on other states for, and existing databases, as well as just clarifying our penalty provision. Next slide, please. So I would want to take a moment just to talk about our electric storage water heater design requirement, as it is a first in nation. We've had some very interesting lessons learned, and yeah, I think it would be a great thing to bring to the table. So if we go to the next slide. So this requirement, this design requirement applies to electric stored water heaters that kind of this 40 to 120 gallon range. And this was a very active conversation. So the requirement is that there is a CTA 2045 or equivalent communication port for all new water heaters in the state. And that allows for, these kind of grid or demand response, grid active programs to happen with our water heaters, which would be incredible. And this is somewhat ahead of the curve for us. So we did have a very active conversation. Most of our pre-rulemaking workshops were on this issue, working with manufacturers and the organization representing manufacturers, as well as our local energy efficiency organization, NEA, and utilities were at the table. We had some environmental advocates, and it was a really good conversation, I have to say. I think the big tension is just making sure that we're allowing for innovation in this kind of nascent space, while also making sure that we're starting to build up our fleet of grid-ready water heaters. So as I mentioned, it requires a CTA 2045 or equivalent. That or equivalent is going to be a conversation ongoing, but there's a process in place to have Commerce evaluate those suggestions. And then the biggest kind of conversation was around the implementation date. In statute, it was January 1st, 2021 for all electric storage water heaters. We came to a compromise with all our stakeholders, so we fell right in the middle, which is, I guess, as a state agency where you want to be. So January 1st, 2021 for heat pump water heaters, and then, and I've flipped, excuse me, that's a typo. It should be January 1st, 2022 for electric resistance water heaters. I do apologize about that, and I will make sure to get NASEO the correct slides. So if we go to the next slide. So just really quickly, I want to say some words about why we chose to lead on this, being a state that tends to follow. We believe that this technology is really supporting the electric grid of the future and enabling the utilities to create programs that are going to manage water heating loads and more effectively reduce demand and peak charges. So that's really important. And again, it goes to our own state clean energy standards, and it's going to allow us that flexibility as we manage the grid and bring on more renewable energy. So we just passed also last year 100% clean energy by 2045 standard. And we heard from several utilities in our state that are very excited to get this process going. So that was very encouraging to have them at the table saying that this was an important piece of that work. In terms of the brass tacks of it, it really helped that we had a regional behavioral study done by an Oregon utility, PGE, with BPA, as well as the Northwest Energy Efficiency Alliance. There's a study on that. I can happy to send folks. CEC is also doing a docket right now on load management, where they had a presentation on this. And that was so useful to be able to bring this into the conversation around the state appliances that we are updating as well. So I also just need to kind of personally thank everyone that worked on that. And again, our state sponsor, Representative Jeff Morris. And then finally, at Commerce, we're really supportive of modular open standards that are good for both consumers and are also going to allow this innovation in this more nascent space. So we really see that this standard allows for that flexibility, but also some accountability and getting the conversation going. So with that, next slide. I just want to say thank you. Here's my contact information, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Again, please raise your hand and/or use the question box if you wish to offer questions or comments. In the meanwhile, one that had come in, I think a number of people are interested in: who and how are state level standards enforced? Do states have inspectors? Are there audits done? Do you have in Hawaii or Washington or Marianne, the other states you interact with, are there secret shoppers that look for non-complying products? How does that work? And maybe I'll ask Sarah first, then Howard, and then Marianne, if you have thoughts on that.
Yeah, thanks. So in Washington, we have it is on manufacturers to be compliant with these standards and when they're implemented. A big part of this work is going to be, especially that it's been a little while since we've had an update. A big part of our implementation is going to be education and outreach to distributors, manufacturers, retail sales folks about these new laws. And so we're just, looking towards that work to really lean on enforcement, and then also following the good work that's happened in other states, in terms of the way California has been working on this, and a lot of the the fact that we're using the testing methods, many of which are coming from California, we're going to be leaning on those standards and those databases to help with enforcement.
Howard, do you have anything to add?
The legislation calls for us, the Hawaii State Energy Office, and an outfit called Hawaii Energy to split the enforcement responsibilities. Hawaii Energy is an offshoot of the PUC, Public Utilities Commission, where whenever we receive our utility or electricity bill, there's a number of small charges on the back of the bill, and one of them goes to the PUC, who transfers the funds to, it's called the Public Benefits Fee Administrator. And they have now a considerable staff, and they are charged with determining the most effective rebates that can be had for any energy using appliance. And they are charged with notifying the retailers and manufacturers of the passage of this law. And then we are charged with setting standards. And actually, in that case, we will just follow the lead of Washington or California in setting the standards. So it's not an onerous set of duties at all. It can be all done from our desks, and we are not, and maybe some states are concerned about this, we're not going to put on a policeman's uniform and go around to retail outlets and tell them that their appliances are not in accord with the new law. So it's not,
thank you, Howard.
Not onerous at all.
Okay. I was going to move on to Marianne, but we do have some hands raised, so in the interest of more participation, I think Julia Dumaine from Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. Maddie, have you? Yeah, Julia, can you speak up?
Yep, I'm here. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you.
Great. Hello, everyone. So thank you to both Howard and Sarah for sharing your experiences. So I guess I'll start my question with a really quick recap of what happened in Connecticut last year. We also put forth the model bill, and we had great support and assistance from ASAP, and so we were very grateful for that. And everything seemed all systems go. It was going well. And then it just got to the end of our legislative session, and it was never called to the floor to vote, and we were sort of stumped at first at what had happened, because we felt like we had addressed a lot of our opposition. We got all of our opposition to be formally withdrawn, actually, and so we felt like we were in a good condition. And then what we ended up learning later was that our chairs of our Energy and Technology Legislative Committee actually were not quite as satisfied with the bill as we thought they had been. There was also a lot of other high-profile legislation going through the last year that I think distracted from it a bit too. But what we basically took away was that we needed to figure out a better engagement process for our legislators, and ensuring that we really did have all of their questions answered. And so I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you. I appreciate you both sort of highlighting some of your best practices from engaging your legislators. Like Howard, you mentioned keeping your bills as simple as possible. I agree, absolutely. Sarah, you talked about establishing, these are pre-existing standards, that we're not inventing anything new. This is not, and these products already exist. But I'm just curious if either of you can speak to any particular instances of legislators actually opposing the bill and having concerns or questions about it that, and how did you handle those?
Yeah, thank you so much. Howard, go ahead, Howard, please.
Okay. When we were at the hearings, a couple of the legislators were concerned about the added costs, added burdens on the consumer or on the retailer. And basically we said, no, all we're going to be doing in the way of enforcement is education and notification. And it's taking a little bit of our time, but not a whole heck of a lot. So there was no hidden administrative costs involved there, and that satisfied them.
Great, yeah, and so for us, two concerns really come to mind. One is around the security issues with the grid-ready water heater. So we had a Republican representative who's really, and this year she's also really interested in data privacy and really, really thoughtful about this stuff. So we worked with her to add an amendment to some language with the water heater standard, just to ensure that any data collected in any kind of from any kind of program or communication device attached to the port has to abide by our data security standards and provisions. So that was, I think, a really successful conversation that we got to have with her. Another one that came up quite a bit was around the low flow appliances. So the water products really got a lot of attention, I'll say. And, a lot of the concern, there's a lot of concerns, but, we definitely heard from a mixture of rural representatives that, there could be some issues with either kind of some health issues with the water not kind of flowing through enough, and we were able to talk to our Department of Health around the kind of Legionella issues and really understand that better and provide information to folks. Another one was around just this, how will adding a low flow appliance affect all the other parts of the infrastructure, right? So it's not the infrastructure of the pipes isn't meant to handle or be connected with these low flow appliances. Well, we actually brought in an engineer that works on wastewater. So from WASWD, our Washington Association of Wastewater and Sewer Districts, he came in and gave this really fantastic testimony about the deferred cost of infrastructure upgrades that are represented by having these low flow appliances, and so he was in a rapidly expanding district outside of Seattle area, and there had been some concern that Seattle's really strict water codes would hurt outside of that jurisdiction or have this kind of downhill effect, but actually he said the opposite. So that was, connecting with the water infrastructure folks was a really useful conversation. Now, I'm not going to try to say that we can change hearts and minds on that one, but I think that testimony was really fantastic, and unfortunately it was engaged in a little bit too late in the game, but it was one of our last hearings at the last part of the process. But if your state is anything like ours, the low flow appliances were ones where there was kind of a lot of interesting issues that I think you can really have folks speak to and support. And I'd be happy to talk more about those details offline.
Thank you both. I think we have another hand raised. Is that for Kim Burke at the Colorado Energy Office? Kim, are you able to talk?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep, loud and clear.
Okay, great. Yeah, I have a comment and a question for Sarah. First, I wanted to congratulate you on passing the grid interactive design requirements for electric storage water heaters. That's super exciting. Something that perhaps we'll think about here in the future. As Marianne noted, Colorado passed an appliance standards bill similar to Washington's during our last legislative session, and we adopted standards for 15 product categories sold in our state. And my question is around the rulemaking process that you talked a little bit about, that you undertook for the products covered under your legislation. And I wanted to see if you could share a little bit more about any other lessons you learned through that process or challenges you encountered.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So to be totally honest with you, I think the only thing we really talked about during that rulemaking process, 98% of it was around the electric water heater. Some of their questions were more just clarifying the mechanisms of how things were working. So, just kind of our date of sale versus date of manufacture. And I think what helped us was that we did a lot of kind of outreach before we drafted rules. So, kind of talked to people and got a sense of what the conversations might be like. So it's particularly with the water heater manufacturers and HRI. And then we came in with our proposed rules, but as a draft. And so we had, before the rule making even started, draft rules to look at and some specifics. And so I think once people kind of saw what it was and, understood how we had it laid out, we really didn't have that many questions or concerns, to be totally honest. We'll see, I think the next step of the process might actually be, now that we have our Washington, code updated, that I think will be the next step on the education and outreach. I think is going to be really critical, because now what I am hearing is folks kind of getting the telephone game around, oh gosh, what does this mean? And what the enforcements and how it's going to work, and is it date of sale? Are we going to is it for retrofits? Is it for new stuff? There's just a lot of misinformation out there. So it's going to be really critical that we're really shored up on how we talk about this with distributors, retailers, and manufacturers, as well as small businesses in our state. But luckily, in the same breath of doing all this appliance standards work, we are also standing up a pretty big clean buildings package that includes a lot of outreach. So we kind of have this natural infrastructure to be able to also include work on working on education of the appliance standards in that as well. So yeah, no really other big take homes though, just being really open and really able to talk to folks and having those draft rules ahead of time so people just could see that it's clean and clear, as Howard said, to the point, right? So.
Yeah, and this is Howard, another factor is that I imagine, Sarah, you have the same thing. There is a lead-in time for the bill to take effect.
Yeah,
correct.
In
our case, it's October 1, 2020. Well, that's not all that far away, but it does give retailers a chance to sell off their non-compliant products and stock up on the compliance products. And I'm wondering if Melissa Miyashiro is on the call. She is with an environmental group called Blue Planet, and she was the champion of this bill. I just wanted to give a shout out to her if she's not in.
She's not on.
Not on. Oh, how sad. I invited her, and she said, I'll see if I can make it. Anyway, that's an example of strong alliances.
Yeah, and I'd also, Howard, thank you for mentioning the lead-in time. Most of our standards will be implemented in January 1st, 2021. So yeah, again, a little bit of lead-in time, which is really beneficial for the conversation.
Yeah, that allows retailers to take a deep breath and say, oh, this isn't going to be almost retroactive on my part, because they do have to find a happy home for the non-compliant products first.
Okay, so another question, and I think this is primarily for Sarah, but there's a subsidiary for, I think, probably Marianne. So with the grid communication, grid interactive capability for the water heaters, are there other appliances or equipment being considered for grid communication capabilities? And then the related question that maybe is that's for Marianne is, might the future ASAP model standards include grid interactive features?
Thanks for the question. Yeah, so at this time, we're not actively pursuing any other updates to our standards or design requirements that would include CTA 2045 in, something else. However, I will say that there is work happening kind of a more national scale in that conversation. So as I mentioned, California Energy Commission has an open docket right now on load management and just had a hearing or workshop last week where they talked through all different manner of different kinds of loads and appliances that could be part of a grid active conversation. And with really kind of this underbelly conversation around what, kind of open standards might be part of that conversation. So I think a broader conversation around which open standard, so CTA 2045, and how to, kind of get that out as the standard to use for anything that wants to be grid interactive, and just making sure that we're really thinking through all those issues is a really interesting one. So mostly just kind of participating at that level and hearing about what, California might be working on, and then seeing, where there might be an opportunity to think about that at a federal level. So, but we're, open to ideas though, if people have them.
This is Howard again. That brings up another topic, namely peaking of utilities. We're unique in Hawaii in having an evening peak. And in our testimony, we pointed out that when you have more efficient appliances, they could be running any time of the day or night, including in the evening. So if the appliances are drawing less, they are reducing that evening peak for us.
And Marianne, any comments on whether the ASAP model might incorporate some of these grid interactive factors?
Yes, we've just begun to discuss this, and I think in the short term, we would probably do maybe like a cafeteria option to say, here's something that they've done in California. You might consider this language that they've done. And then we still need to discuss more to see where we go from there. But I think in the short term, we'd say, there's this great thing Washington has done. Take a look. And I just want to add one thing before you wrap up, is that many states would have videos of their hearings, and Washington does, Colorado does, Connecticut does, and it's very, very helpful to take a look at some of those hearings to learn from them, so we can help anyone pinpoint some hearings to look at before, if you're going forward with standards.
Okay, great. That looks to be it. So I will take a moment to put in a shameless plug for the NASEO NARUC Grid Interactive Efficient Buildings Working Group, which quite a few of the states tuning in today are part of. This is a collaboration of NASEO with NARUC, examining issues of grid interactive buildings and load flexibility. For those states who are not yet part of this group, please let us know and we'll send you more information and see if you are interested in participating. We're particularly excited that we are partnered with the Department of Energy and with some of the national laboratories for some technical assistance to the states. So that seems to be it as far as questions right now. So let me take a moment to thank all of our panelists, and also to thank all of you out there who have tuned in. Grateful for your participation, and we hope this has been useful for you. Please let us know if you have any questions on this topic, and we'll pass them along to the right people. There are some of the issues are right in NASEO's wheelhouse. We're very pleased to collaborate with ASAP on the appliance standards topic. And again, the recording and the slides will be posted in not too long a time, not instantly, but before too long. And thank you very much. Take care, everyone.
This is Howard. Let me put in a final plug, and that's for Mary Ann. Of course, as this legislation evolved, we had a lot of questions, and Mary Ann was so helpful, it ought to be illegal. So that should ameliorate a lot of
Thank you,
concern.
Howard.
I'm sorry, I also need to put in a plug for ASAP. They were really incredible and absolutely instrumental in us getting this work done. Really just had a lot of great data that we were able to share with our legislators. That was really every time we needed, help on stuff, they were there. So just an incredible resource. So also a plug.
Thank you.
Amen.
Pleasure to work with you all.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone. Bye now.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you.
Aloha.